Now, a trove of documents showing ties between the Moti Group and Zimbabwean politicians will remain secret for now. Earlier this year, amaBhungane began reporting on papers exposing alleged corruption by the Moti Group, which is led by controversial businessman Zunaid Moti. But the Moti Group approached the Gauteng High Court last week to prevent the publication of new articles and forced the journalists to return all the leaked documentation. amaBhungane said it was not given any opportunity to be heard during the application and it didn't even know about it. Well, yesterday a revised order was made after an agreement was reached. Now, according to that, amaBhungane is not required to hand over the documents but to preserve them until the matter is heard later. However, no further stories may be published until at least October. The South African National Editors Forum, or SANEF, has condemned attempts by the Moti Group to stop the publication of those documents and the articles outlining them. To discuss, we're joined by SANEF Gauteng Convenor, Dr. Glenda Daniels. Doctor, thank you for being with us. Firstly, the latest is this revised order whereby amaBhungane doesn't have to hand over the documents. Do you welcome that revision?
Absolutely, Francis. Thanks for having me, giving me the opportunity to talk about this. The fact that it was partially overturned is indeed a victory for media freedom and for investigative journalists, and is in keeping with the Constitution. So the first ruling, of course, it was completely inexplicable as to why it was, number one, an ex parte hearing, meaning only one side was heard, and it was done in secret in chambers. And the judgment that amaBhungane should hand over documents is actually completely anti-constitutional, because we have a law, the Promotion of Access to Information Act, which gives the public the right to know on matters of public interest. And of course, this is a matter of public interest. Big business company, big businessman, and amaBhungane were delving into shenanigans between them and Zimbabwean politicians, amongst other things. So for now, the whistleblowers are protected. This is a very important principle in a democracy, that whistleblowers have to be protected. Otherwise, we're never going to get any kind of exposure of corruption, accountability issues. This kind of ruling that the first judgment made to gag or to ask for handover of documents is very, very reminiscent of the old days before democracy, the apartheid days, when willy-nilly the courts would do this.
Yeah.
So,
well, Dr. Daniels, let me stop you there, because you said it's inexplicable that only one side was heard. amaBhungane said they didn't even know about it. So the court gave no explanation as to why it was willing to do that after only hearing one side. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what I'm saying. So amaBhungane hadn't heard about it, and the court, or the judge in the case, just willy-nilly decided that he will grant this order to interdict, in other words, to ask for the handover of the documents within 48 hours. This sort of thing just doesn't happen in our new democracy. Or, if it does, when it does, it shouldn't happen. And thank goodness we have robust civil society organizations, especially in the media space, that can act as quickly as it did to do an interdict of the interdict, so to speak, to bring an urgent application, and then it won it. So this then protects the whistleblowers that gave amaBhungane information about the various kinds of shenanigans, which unfortunately, as you just noted in your news bulletin, it can only be published in October. Even that, I think, is a bit hectic. It's a long time to publish. I don't know why October. This interferes with the public's right to know. It, as I was saying, it just shouldn't be there in the new South Africa.
Yeah, and let's go back to a very fundamental principle, but I think there is a misunderstanding when you have people say, well, journalists are stealing documents. The public right to know overrides any concerns about how journalists come into possession of documents, because they are important for the South African public. Am I explaining it correctly? And you're also talking about safety. So even handing over the documents can put somebody in danger.
Well, number one, there was no theft in this instance. amaBhungane didn't steal documents. And it isn't completely about this right of journalists overriding over any other right because of the public's right to know. You can't actually steal. But normally what happens with investigative units and journalists is you get given these documents to say, look, this is happening and this is the evidence. And journalists have to then protect those whistleblowers. And that's exactly what's happened in this case. So in my view, this is a waste of very precious resources of journalism, investigative units, time resources and money resources, which journalism just doesn't have. It's a media freedom issue. It's a public's right to know issue. It's a freedom of expression issue. It's about accountability. It's about the kind of laws we have in South Africa which actually protect journalism in the Constitution and in terms of PIA. And it's about whistleblower protection, very importantly. And then, Francis, of course, we know that South Africa it jumped up 10 places in the press freedom stakes in the world, from 35 to 25. And one of the reasons for that is because we do have a free media. We don't have the journalists being thrown in jail and being stopped from the reporting. So this kind of thing can take one back. If this judge had actually won completely on his interdict, regarding the handover of documents, this certainly would be taking South Africa back and would be setting a precedent for other investigations. People would be scared, people would be self-censoring. We don't have that yet to an extent, any real extent in South Africa, but it could start happening. That means democracy itself is at risk.
All right, thank you for that explanation. And we are doing this in two parts. We will be speaking to Zunaid Moti himself. For now, that was SANEF Gauteng convener, Dr. Glenda Daniels. So she was joining us. They are very concerned about that first judgment. It has been moderated for now, so amaBhungane doesn't have to hand over the documentation. At the end of April, the amaBhungane team did write for the Daily Maverick, and it reported that a trove of leaked internal documents laid bare close ties between controversial businessmen Zunaid Moti and high-ranking politicians in Zimbabwe. And there are claims that were emerging in those reports regarding possible bribery, but the team has been stopped from reporting for now. Zunaid Moti is the owner of the Moti Group that has interests in mining, property and aviation.